Hey everyone, I'm here with Evan Knox. He is the founder of Caffeine Marketing. You can find more about him at caffeine.marketing. And we just recorded a couple episodes of the podcast. Had such a great time. And so I thought we'd hop on and have a little casual conversation. What's up, man?
What's up, Mario? It was a blast hanging on the podcast.
Yeah,
You're an awesome interviewer for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We had a lot of fun. We talked about, your journey through the marketing world because that's like your jam right now. And,
Yeah.
StoryBrand, which you are. Now, let me ask you that. Like, how did you get into that? Did you just read the book StoryBrand and you were like, wow, this stuff's cool. I want to go to the next level? Or how did that work?
Yeah. So when I first heard about StoryBrand, I was at a nonprofit in Charlotte, and it was the first time I'd heard of Donald Miller before. My wife and I kind of read his books actually before we got married, and so familiar with him as a person. And then when I got to Charlotte and I worked at this nonprofit, they had just gone through like this big StoryBrand training, so it's like really important. So I had to like catch up, So that's when I first learned about StoryBrand. And then when I started my agency, I actually was using those same principles in the marketing. And then at that time, I just started, and they did not let anyone who had not been an agency or like a marketing professional or whatever, who had not done it like, whatever, for 2 years. So they were like, hey, whenever Caffeine's 2 years old, hit us up, let me know. And so at about a year and a half, I was already using their framework, but I wasn't a guide. And so I hit them up and I was like, guys, like I have the check. Like, let me come. And they were like, oh my God, oh sorry, we've got to reach out. You can come now, whatever. And I was like, all right, great. So anyway, I went there and training was awesome. But yeah, I love the StoryBrand framework. It's amazing. It's so simple. Clients understand it. It's really applicable and it works really well. So I'm a happy camper.
What did you do before StoryBrand?
So I worked at a church in Charlotte. Well, I guess I'm going to do pre-caffeine. So, because caffeine was the thing before StoryBrand. So before that, I worked at a church in Charlotte, and part of my role was marketing for that campus, which is cool.
Okay, so was that like okay, so that was like not your thing. They brought you on to be the marketing director within their organization.
No, so I wasn't the marketing director. It was like 500, 600 people. So this church had multiple locations, and so I was at one campus. I was like the director of social media, essentially. But that
Oh,
was
cool.
like just one of many things, which I'm sure those in the nonprofit world, they get
So,
that.
did you start Caffeine before you found StoryBrand, or did you start Caffeine because you found StoryBrand?
Started caffeine before StoryBrand. So caffeine's been around for 3.5 years, somewhere around there. And I've been a StoryBrand guide for over a year, coming up on 2 years. So yeah, I started caffeine before, wanted to get into the StoryBrand. Really, the framework works, bottom line. And so I like having to be able to have the integrity to say, hey, as a StoryBrand certified guide, here's what I recommend, here's the framework. And then really there was stuff that I thought I knew, even as a quote StoryBrand expert before I was a guide. I got there and man, I was totally wrong. And it was a great learning experience to get trained by their team. So I highly recommend, if you do want to get StoryBrand content or have somebody work on it, hire an actual guide, because the quality difference is really pretty apparent. So
That's cool. Do you have access to Donald Miller, and does he like give you like the new stuff that he develops as soon as it comes out?
kinda. So we definitely have like an insider access to him. We've got a Slack channel, which I don't know if that's overwhelming or underwhelming to some people,
Yeah.
but it's awesome. There's probably 500 plus of us guides now. I think when I came in there, we were like in the 200s or so. And, the community is awesome. Every week they check in with us and they provide tons of resources and additional training. As much training as really you could even want, they provide. And, we do get early access to books and whatnot. So I was like, his most recent book, Marketing Made Simple, I was able to read that before it came out, which is pretty cool.
Nice. So tell me, marketing, is that where you see yourself staying for this foreseeable future? I know you're acquiring other companies. You're in the growth department of that, where when you acquire them, you help them
Yeah.
grow. Do you think that's where you're going to stay, or do you have other plans like down the line for once you get, into your 60s, 70s, that whole thing? Have you planned that out that far?
So earlier we were talking about Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman's probably 10 years older than I am. I don't know how old he is, but so I'm in my 20s,
Yeah.
and I feel like I classic millennial. So I guess I'm a younger millennial in that case. But man, long-term commitment, 70s, I got no idea what I'm doing. I got no idea what I'm doing 5, 10 years from now.
Yes.
So, it's like,
No, I was just curious because you got a lot going on. I mean, you're doing the
yeah.
StoryBrand thing, you're acquiring companies, you're helping them grow. Like, is this part of the journey that you have mapped out, or is it just like, hey, whatever comes up, comes up?
Yeah, I'm definitely more, you're right, definitely more strategic than just, go with the flow. I enjoy marketing. I enjoy strategy. I enjoy helping people a lot. I think for me, there's the goal of helping people and making a difference in this world. That's the most important to me and my family. But the next thing is I just want total financial freedom. Like I would love to just like my wife and I want to go do like mission projects or whatever with our church. I just would love to just go. You know what I mean? Like I would just love to have the financial resources and passive income that's just there that we could leave, do whatever we want. Um, so that is all. The longer term plan is just to be completely financially independent, not have to work, and then do whatever we want. So
Nice, man. What's your favorite thing about Atlanta?
it's so underrated. Honestly, I've lived in Australia, Thailand. I lived in Colorado, like in the Boulder, Denver area, and I love Colorado is amazing, like awesome. But if you subtract the mountains from it, it's not that great. So like in my opinion, it's like the big appeal is the mountains. And so in my opinion, I think Georgia has everything to offer, especially Atlanta. You've got the city, you've got the rural area, you've got kind of mountains, but not real mountains, lakes, coastlines, all that. So I love Atlanta. I think it's the best, aside from the mountains. So we definitely have a Sky Miles card because we go out and ski
Nice.
fairly, not fairly often, but as much as we can.
You grew up in Atlanta, right?
Yeah. So I grew up what we would call OTP, which is outside the perimeter. And I currently live ITP, which is inside the perimeter of Atlanta. So like I actually live in Atlanta now versus growing up outside of Atlanta.
You're gonna be. Is that where you foresee staying in Atlanta? Is that your plan as of right now?
For the time being, yes. We live in an area called Buckhead,
Okay.
and it's bougie and expensive. And so we rent right now. We don't own. And so I think for us, we're trying to figure out because in my opinion, this is like the best part of Atlanta. Like I love
Hmm.
this area. But do we want this that much, or would
Hmm.
we rather go live on the lake up in
Yeah.
like on Lake Lanier? Because that would be awesome to me. Just to wake up in the morning and go wakeboard and slalom ski. Like
Yep.
that's a
I'm a
good
water
life.
guy myself. I could dig that, and I love that you
Yeah.
use the word bougie.
Yeah.
It's such an underrated word. Speaking of underrated.
Yeah. I've got it reminds me of one of my old coworkers. She was always so funny. We would be like, oh, it's Katie. She's so bougie. Like with her, that's too bougie for her,
That's
or not
funny.
bougie enough.
Awesome, man. Well, let's cap off with this really quickly. At this point in your young life and where you are, do you think doing what you're doing now is the most fulfilled that you've been on your journey so far?
I think so. This is maybe we'll get a little deeper here, and everybody take it with a grain of salt if you want, if that helps you. But my faith is really important to me, and my relationship with Jesus. And so I look back at probably the hardest season of my life, and this is we're gonna get real deep real quick. But my dad was struggling with narcotics when I was in high school, and among other things, my parents were getting a divorce. It's tough, and actually, I would say that's probably the most fulfilled I've been in my life. Now, I was like the most kind of awful season at the same time, but I felt really close to God in that season. And so I think for me, if I look at is the season awesome? Yeah, I mean, if you look from the outside, yeah, it's like you got a business is going great, you got all kinds of fun opportunities, you get to make a difference in people's lives. That's all great. But I think for me, I'm looking for that kind of connection back to God. Like that to me is going to signal the thing that's like, yeah, we're doing the right thing now. We're caring for other people more than myself and leaning into Him.
So, how do you get that connection without having to be in such a difficult place like it was last time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that I've quite found the answer. I think adversity definitely draws. Um, not trying to sound cliche, but it draws you to your knees. I mean, it makes you aware that you can't do it on your own, and that I think for me, it really reminded me of the unconditional love of a perfect father, and I'm just was really able to lean into that in this season. So I think for this season, it looks like just intentionality in relationships. So I was talking to some guys that I hang out with every Thursday morning. We kind of do a little Bible study thing. And we were talking about how the relationship with God and like going to talk to him kind of feels like, it feels hard to do because we live in a culture where, or at least I'm addicted to my phone. And so it's like that instant dopamine hit. But a relationship with God is like any other relationship. Like you have to continually show up and you have to talk and you have to be connected to them, because then your brain produces serotonin and oxytocin and helps you feel connection towards these people. And in this case, God. And so I think it's a matter of just showing up and just making him aware,
I agree. And to that point, and if we'll talk, since you brought this up and we're talking faith really quickly, I'm a Catholic. And so I'm a practicing Catholic and I grew up that way, went to Catholic school, all that stuff. And one of the priests, I was at a Catholic men's retreat and I was talking to the priest. He's a really well-known priest, travels all over, speaks, does that whole thing. And that's kind of why I was kind of drawn to him, because he's a media guy too, but he's also a priest, which I thought was interesting because I never saw that before until that point.
Yeah.
So I was having a conversation with him and we were talking about like, the Catholic view of like heaven and hell and that whole thing.
Okay.
And he said, look, hell isn't the place where it's like fire and all that stuff. He said, in fact, Catholics don't even recognize that there really is anyone in hell. There may be, there may not be. Who are we to say there is or there isn't? It's between them and God. It's not up to us to judge. That's up to God. But he said, here's what I do know. God will give you what you want. God wants all of us to be with him. And if you make God the most important thing in your life, then he'll give you more of that. But if you make other things more important, God will say, well, if that's what you want, then here it is. And so when we go away from God and we don't have that intentionality around him and build our lives around him, he'll give us more of that. But then that's kind of what quote unquote hell looks like, is that separation from God. And if you make other things more important than God, he'll say, I love you so much, you can have more of that.
That's interesting. I think, like Catholicism and traditional Protestantism, whatever, how would you say that? I think are very similar. And then also there's like different nuances to it. But it reminds me of a guy who, by the name of like C.S. Lewis, he's like a historical Christian writer of sorts. I think he chronicles Narnia and stuff like that. But so he, at one point, I think he said, for those who choose, also, anyone listening right now, I'm sorry if you're like, what are these guys talking about? But
no, this is casual conversation. This is what we talk about.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So, he basically, I think he said a kind of a version of that, but I guess what he was trying to say, if I remember it right, I don't have it right in front of me, but it was like, for those who choose God and choose to follow God and choose to believe in God and Jesus, those people are going to spend eternity with him because that's what they were wanting, kind of like what you were saying. And so those who deny God, they're going to spend eternity without him. And if God is everything that's good and perfect and wonderful in this world, like if he created those things and everything like that's not him is the absence of that, then it would kind of suck. So that's just another, I think, a version of that or interesting take on that. So that's cool.
Very cool stuff, man. Thank you for the conversation. Thanks for bringing that up. That's why I like to have these casual conversations, because I think they just go wherever the flow goes. And I kind of just let, the flow take over or God take over or what have you. And this is where it led us. So I think it's very applicable for us to talk about this, and we'll have to do it again sometime soon and talk more about it, because I think we could go even deeper, which would be fun and probably get a lot out of it on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. To remind people, caffeine.marketing is where they can find you online, connect with you across all social media. Evan Knox, thanks again, my friend, and let's do it again soon.
All right, sounds good. See you, man.